Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. My name is Andy Fell, as most of you know, and I'm the founder of a business called Gift 631, an events brand called What Winners Do. Great pleasure to be joined by Phil Moss. Now, Phil has had a really interesting life and career in professional football, round ball football, the proper football. That's both playing, both coaching, doing TV punditry and TV work, and now he has moved into the world of financial services. And Phil has a senior role with the National Australia Bank. I nearly said the National Westminster Bank, my old company, the National Australia Bank, in a leadership and coaching role. And Phil, it'd be absolutely fantastic. Rather than me fill out the story, if we could start by you just sharing a little bit about your life and career.
Thank you so much, Andy, for that intro. And firstly, can I start by thanking you so much for the invitation to be here tonight. It's tonight our time in Sydney. It's a wonderful honour to be able to mix and speak and converse with people from all parts of the world and who are all passionate about leadership and different parts of leadership. We all know it's a very complex part of life, but something that we're all passionate about brings us together, and just being able to share some ideas and my story is a wonderful honour tonight. So thanks again for having me, and looking forward to the next 45 minutes. So where have I come from? Well, I'm born in London, which there's no accent there, because I decided to move to Australia when I was 3 months old. Wasn't happy with the weather around the time I was born in October, so decided to move out here. But Dad's a Mancunian, born and bred. Mum's Aussie, and they met while Mum was over in England with her parents, and they've set up family here for obviously that length of time, 1971 we're talking. So football was always in my blood right from day one, being born in London, having a dad who played for Manchester Greater Schools, and then went into to medicine to become a doctor when he realised he just wasn't athletic enough to make it at the top level. Over in Australia, joined the local club, always had dreams of being a professional footballer. Probably more so a professional coach than a footballer. I think coaching comes a lot more naturally to me than playing did. But I finally got my my breakthrough at the ripe old age of 26 as a professional player, which was sort of grandparenthood in professional athlete terms. But had a few injuries along the way in my early 20s that probably held me back. But just had that, which I didn't realise at the time was so strong, but that resilience to just keep chasing my goal of being a professional player, because I knew if I could make it as a player, that would give me my greatest shot of being a professional coach, and that's sort of how it played out. I don't think you have to be a professional player to be a fantastic coach, but in Australia, around the time I was coming through the ranks, it certainly helped, and it's probably the majority of coaches at the top level in world football, how that's played out. So that's a brief snapshot of my journey. There's a lot more detail behind it. I don't want to bore anyone with it, because I think the gist of tonight is to really get into leadership and what makes us tick and what makes us want to get the best out of other people.
Yeah, so Phil, I'd like to dive straight into coaching actually, and obviously after your playing career, you coached the Central Coast Mariners. You are assistant to Graham Arnold at Sydney FC, and obviously now you're in a leadership and coaching position at the National Australia Bank. So straight in there, what makes a great coach?
Look, it's a simple answer, I think, but a very complex journey. And the simple answer for me is caring about other people and wanting to get the best out of people. And you know, you've obviously got coaching, you've got leadership, you've got mentoring, you've got supporting. There's a lot of different roles, but if you talk about coaching, for me, it's about making people better. It's changing behaviours for the betterment of other people. And you know, you can be you can be very specific with coaching, which I think is a real cut through in changing behaviour. There's generic coaching, of course. There's coaching on the run. There's all different types of coaching methodology, if you like, whether you're on green grass or in a tall building in the corporate world. But I think caring about other people and wanting to get the best out of them and understanding what makes them tick, and being able to recognise, moments that need coaching and deserve coaching, and how you go about that. And in football terms, it can be correcting poor technique. It can be just working on technique. It can be in the video room, playing video back. But I just think the overarching answer to it is caring about other people and making them better.
Yeah, no, I am a fundamental believer in coaching in the moment, and I had the privilege of being asked to speak to the St George Dragons women's National Rugby League side last night before their last game on Saturday, and I was doing a bit of homework for the session and listening to the England Rugby League coach and this guy Sean Wayne, just as many do, just relentlessly talking about being brilliant at the basics. And I'm really interested in having worked in financial services and actually looking at the audience here. There's many people who work in financial services. When I see people in a sporting environment, there's an honesty of conversation. There's a real cut through. There's some brutal honesty there. How have you been able to almost take that coaching experience from the field of play into the corporate towers, and what have you had to change where people are perhaps a little bit more reluctant or a little bit less open to coaching?
I've had to curb my language a little bit. That's one thing. What's acceptable in the dressing room and on the touchline isn't acceptable in the big buildings. But look, I think coaching methodology for me my coaching methodology hasn't really changed too much from football to banking, because it's about recognising a moment to coach and stepping in and not letting that moment pass you by, and being specific but respectfully specific. There's an old saying that I sort of live by, that average players want to be left alone, good players want to be coached, great players want to be told the truth. And I, the first thing I did when I came to NAB with the first team I was given, I'm now just about to jump into my third team in 2 years, just over 2 years, is build a team identity. Now you've got the NAB strategy and the NAB identity, but I think each team within that needs to have an identity and a culture to live by each day, that feeds into the overarching strategy of the bank. And I always make sure that the base or the foundation of the team identity is united. And I give obviously the teams a lot of buy-in and ownership of forming their own team identity. What do they want to look like day to day? And once you form that team identity, so we had united at the base of the triangle. I call it the identity triangle. So you have united, trust, and elite. And then right in the middle of that triangle is their why. Why do they get out of bed every day? Is it family? Is it money? Is it pride in their own performance? What is it that drives the team? And we ended up with family photos in the middle of our triangle, and that was what drove the majority of the team, was to get out of bed and go to work for their family and provide a roof over their family's head, food on the table. And I think once you've got that team identity, you've always got something to anchor back to during coaching sessions, during culture sessions, when the going's good, when the going's tough. You've always got that anchor to fall back to. And I found that in specific coaching sessions where there were challenging conversations, which I think football really set me up well for in the corporate world. Again, you can always tie back to the team identity, and this is what we said we want to live by every day. This is the culture that we wanted to create, and it seemed to work quite well. But I've been really impressed with the appetite for specific coaching at NAB. I think people want to be. this is the part that I struggled with when I was making the decision to come from football into the corporate world. Is elite football is all about high performance. Everyone who drives through that gate of the training complex every day and turns up on game day wants to be the best they can be. They're self-driven, self-motivated to be the best they can be. It's a short career. You've got to make the most of it. So my big question mark was, is that what I'm going to find in the corporate world? Is it going to be a group of people and teams and a larger corporation that just wants to be the best they can be every single day on an individual basis, which then collectively gives you some incredible business results? And that's not what I found, of course. There was less people that I worked with that were driven to be the very best they could be every day. But I think once you set that identity and that culture, it really quickly weeds out the ones who don't want to perform at their very best every day, and it gives them that real motivation to be part of something bigger. So it's worked quite well over my 2 years at NAB, and I know I can see Ross Gillum on the call tonight, and he ran the mobile banking team in Queensland. He had the same philosophy up in Queensland, and we used to feed off each other a lot. So yeah, it's 2 years down the track. It's been fantastic.
Ross Gillum, one of the greatest human beings I've ever worked with. I want to flip the question the other way though, Phil. And this is the case for, I see a lot of people on this call who lead teams of people in a corporate environment. How about when you've got a superstar on the numbers, but they don't fit the values, they don't fit the culture? How do you deal with a scenario like that?
Well, I've got a couple of stories on that one that spring to mind straight away, and it's very difficult. It is difficult because the competitive side of your brain is saying, look, this person is a high performer and helps the team to win, but on the other side of the brain, it's like no one's larger than the team, no one's bigger than the team. At Sydney FC, when the couple of years before I joined them, my mentor, my great mate and former colleague Graham Arnold, who coaches the Australian national team now, the Socceroos, and broke every record there is to break in the A-League, was just about to take over Sydney FC, and there was a player by the name of Alessandro Del Piero. Some of you may have heard of him. Reasonably big name for those who haven't. Was an absolute star for Italy over many, many years. Absolute legend of the game. And he'd come over he'd signed a contract with Sydney FC, and he was aging. Legs were slowing up, still scoring some goals. But he had his own, had his own trainer, his own physio, his own dressing room, his own gymnasium at the training complex. And Arnie, before he took over, said that the money was sorted, and all the conditions of Arnie's contract was in place. He said, "There's one last thing before I sign this contract. You need to remove Del Piero from Sydney FC." And of course, the chairman was up in arms. What do you mean? He's, marketing wise, and he's scoring goals. And Arnie said, "No, I won't have anyone who thinks they're bigger than the team. I'll coach other players to replace his goals and make other signings." So he was very, very firm on, I don't want him. He's bigger than the team. He's a big personality. He doesn't conform with the culture that I want, which is all about the team. So he's out. I had a different scenario when I took over the Central Coast Mariners of a club captain who'd been there for 10 years. And on the Central Coast, he was revered by the fans, and in some ways was the face of the club. But he was really slowing up. One of the regrets I have of my days in charge of the Mariners is that I didn't make the same decision as Arnie and just say, respectfully, but see him out and start fresh. I think leadership is all about communication. There's a lot of different things about leadership, but communication is absolutely at the heart of all the ingredients, because if you sit down face to face with a human being and you communicate, there's not too many situations I've been in where you haven't been able to find a solution. In fact, I really can't think of any. The situation I found myself in was because I didn't communicate. I should have sat down and had a face-to-face conversation. It was very early in my head coaching career. And I erred on the side of caution because I didn't want to get the chairman, the board, the fans offside. Had I sat down and had a conversation, I think things would have turned out very differently. So, yeah, communication, I think, with any star player is just as important as it is with the kid just making his debut or someone just joining the bank.
Yeah, I think there's so much in that. First of all, I agree. I frequently say that leadership is about communication, and most of the clients that I work with, where there are challenges, it is predominantly through a lack of honest communication. Secondly, I think your comments around how Arnie handled Del Piero, I think is a massive message to everyone that no one is bigger than the team, no one's bigger than the organisation. And, Jack Welch was famously saying, I give everyone a second chance on the numbers, but I give nobody a second chance on the values. And I think it is that type of mindset. I have a signed Del Piero shirt in the office here behind me, actually, so I feel a little bit less about it after hearing that story.
I must say, though, Andy, just quickly on Del Piero, because I had the opportunity of being the assistant coach for the A-League All-Stars when we played against Juventus, which was Del Piero's club for his whole career, obviously. And part of his deal, excuse me, of coming out to the A-League was that towards the end of his playing days here in Australia, Juventus would come out to play against an A-League All-Stars team. So I was in camp for 10 days with the guy. And yes, he wanted his own trainer and gym and things like that. But as a human being, he was first class. He was a real gentleman, very humble, as you find with most of most people that reach the very peak of their powers, whether it be in sport or business. Very, very humble, very down to earth, happy to take young players under his wing and give them all the knowledge that he could in the 10-day camp that we're in. So I lived with him for 10 days and I can't speak more highly of the guy. I think the thing with Arnie coming into Sydney FC was he just wanted to make it his time, put his stamp on the club. Things had to change because the club wasn't performing. And that was the big ticket item that sort of got him the buy-in of everyone else.
I mean, Phil, you spoke about humility there. Right at the start, you were speaking about resilience. Now, obviously, there's for example, there's a lot of people on this call who are in the UK who are having a really challenging time again at the moment with COVID. We've got people from Melbourne who've been in lockdown for a considerable period of time, and obviously other countries of the world too. You talk about resilience. So what are some of the things that you believe we can do as individuals to build resilience, but also for those of us who have responsibility for others, how can we help others in that regard too?
It's a great question. I really sat back and reflected on my toolkit before I made the massive jump from professional sport to the corporate world. And what I mean by the toolkit is I just believe every experience we go through, just keeps filling up the toolkit, which one day you're really going to need. And if I wasn't confident in that toolkit, and the resilience was a massive part of the toolkit, I could never have made the jump from professional sport to the corporate world. And I had a 3-year contract to stay at Sydney FC at the time. So it was a big, big decision. It wasn't like I was scratching around, for a job or a career change. It just happened to be an opportunity that presented itself. But I think when I look back at what's really built my resilience, and I've had to rely on it big time over the last 2.5 years, I can tell you, no banking experience, no corporate experience, just literally a leadership brain, coaching brain, and here I am in the middle of the banking world, middle of a Royal Commission. COVID hits. It's been an interesting ride. Everyone's blaming me for the NAB share price diving since I joined 2 years ago, and then bonuses are out the window as well. So it's all my fault. But I think if I look back on everything that helped me build my resilience, and it's certainly not the finished product, is that I embrace the tough experiences. So when I'm going through a tough time, I embrace it. And I think straight away my brain flicks to what are the positive things I can take out of this? How long is it going to be till I can turn things around, look back on this as a great experience rather than a tough experience? And if I look back over my life, there's been, a couple that really stand out. One was my family background is Jewish. There's a Jewish Olympic Games called the Maccabea Games in Israel every 4 years. And I was there when there was a bridge collapse back in 1997. 4 people died on it. My brother was not one who died, but he was on the bridge at the time. And I was about 100 metres behind it. So I raced there thinking, that my brother was right at the bottom of just a pile of people, that the bridge was sort of built like that and it collapsed in on itself. So all the people that were sort of on the arc of the bridge were the first to hit the water. And it was like a war zone. At first, we all thought it was gunfire because all you could hear was the bridge collapsing, and there was war on in Israel at the time. So just all that experience, and then dragging my brother out of the water and helping people drag other bodies from the water that had passed away. I look back on that experience, and at the time, it's just absolutely surreal. But you survive it and you learn from it and you become stronger from it. And the other one was when I lost my job at the Central Coast Mariners. I just got my dream job coaching in the A-League as a head coach. I'd been there as an assistant. Things were going very well on the pitch. Then I fell out with the owner. Only going to be one winner there. And it was a very public sacking all over the papers, newspapers, papers, TV and radio. To the point where you walk down the street and people are, whispering behind their hands, and you've got your mobile phone, you've got your family, and you've got your lawyer. And there's only 10 jobs in the A-League in Australia. Actually, one of them's in New Zealand. So nine A-League head coaching jobs in Australia, one which you've just fallen out of. The others are all taken. So you're going to be unemployed for a while. And I remember thinking during both of those situations that I'm going to look back one day and I'm going to leverage these situations to get me through something else. And I think if there's one message that I've always clung on to around my resilience, is that every time I go through a tough experience, I embrace it and look for the positive as quickly as I can.
And that's, first of all, thank you for, sharing the stories. And I have to say, if I look back through my life, the ups and downs, for example, nothing to the extent of obviously the situation you're in with your brother, but out of my 2 redundancies through my long career in financial services has come to my greatest opportunities when I was made redundant by RBS to move to Australia. And then when I took redundancy from the Westpac Group to found Gift 631. So out of a difficult moment has come, a huge opportunity. And I think the important thing for me is as people reflect through the COVID period is to be really clear on what we have learned as an individual through this period. How have we grown? And I say to people, one of the superpowers we all have at all times is our curiosity. And it's important we maintain that growth mindset and continue to learn and develop and grow as people and as leaders. We need to role model those behaviours to others.
Sorry, Andy, just touching on something you said then. I have a, in the teams that I build and the vision that I present to the teams, I have a hashtag opportunity versus obligation. And really what it is challenging everyone to work out what they view things as. Is it an opportunity or is it an obligation? Do we go to work every day because it's our obligation to work and earn money? Or is it an opportunity to be better than what we were yesterday and make those around us better than what they were yesterday and enable them as leaders? And it's a really powerful hashtag. There's a couple of videos, motivational videos, opportunity versus obligation, that I stumbled upon. But that hashtag for me is a really powerful one, because there's a really distinct mind shift between an opportunity and an obligation. And I think it can be very, very empowering.
Yeah, and I'm sure, because I do want to make sure we leave some time for questions, but I want to just keep on this point around, you touched on teams and leading teams. How in your mind, what makes a great team? Could be in business, could be in sport, could be, what are the requirements of a great team?
I think a team that drives its own culture and I always used to use the example of the epicenter of the dressing room in football terms. So, as a leader, we set the culture and we recruit players or employees to fit the culture that you want. So we employ on attitude and personality, and you can teach skill, the old chestnut. But once you've got the culture that you really want, and you start to see your players or your people cultivating that culture from the epicenter of the team or the dressing room, then I think you really know that you're onto a winner with the team. And I got to a situation at the Central Coast Mariners, and Graham had it at Sydney FC as well, where you're trying to decide between a captain, and you've got generally 2 or 3 options where you're thinking, oh, they'd all be great options. And you start to have conversations with them, and they start to say, well, I'd love to be captain, but I actually think he should be captain, or he should be, and they're not, it's not passing the buck. It's them actually putting the team before the individual. And I think once you feel that, I remember turning up to games when you see those little things starting to happen during the week at training and in the coach's office, you start to turn up to games on the weekend, not wondering whether you're going to win, but by how much. And it's this real feeling of confidence, not arrogance. There's a distinct difference in my mind, but you drive to games or you're on the team bus and you can feel, and I've had it at NAB as well. I had a fantastic team in my first role and second role, but let's go back to my first role where I took over what was a strong dressing room, and my boss at the time said, all you got to do is make sure you don't lose that dressing room. They're good people. You'll take them to another level, when you bring in your high performance mentality. But I remember the feeling of walking into branches where the team was. I remember the feeling of leadership days where my branch managers would come to my office, and you walk into the room and you can feel it. You can really feel it. But it's about driving, for me, that consistent message, all the consistent leadership messages all the time. What you staying true to your actions. So your actions more so than what you say, but what you do. I just lost my train of thought there. I was just going to say something else. Oh, yeah, that's right. Being vulnerable from the very start. So when I first walked into NAB, my first leadership talk was about, I'm not here to teach you about banking. I'm here to learn off you what banking's about, but I am going to bring a few things to the table around leadership. And for me, it's all about you. It's not about me. Leadership for me is probably behind parenthood is the most selfless thing you'll do in your life if you get it right. And everyone leave your egos at the door. This is about the team. My job is to make the team as strong as it can be, and improve individuals on a daily basis. And if we all get that right mentality, you can feel when you're part of the old saying in football, a special dressing room, you can really feel it.
Yeah, and vulnerability, is the word for me. And I think I always, authenticity was very important to me. I believe I was a very, very able communicator. I believe I was a great storyteller. I was great at selling the vision. I was great at connecting with all levels within the organization, within my organization. But if I look back through my corporate career, it took me a long time to realize it was okay to be vulnerable. I look back at my early years in the Royal Bank of Scotland Group when my career was going like that. I was just a machine, and I didn't. And Julian, was a great part of my early success, and we just didn't show any vulnerability. And I think we probably did tip at times from confidence into a little bit of arrogance. And I think if there's one huge lesson, if I was talking to myself, my 20-year-old self, it would be willing to be vulnerable earlier in your career and just let people in a little bit. Just before I open it up.
What is it about being vulnerable? What do you think? So I'm turning this around now onto you, Andy. What do you think the most powerful thing about being vulnerable is?
Yeah, and I think it just takes you to a much, much deeper level of connection, but also it enables, you set the tone. I mean, as leaders, we set the tone. You know, everyone Boss watches, we're the role models for the organization. And unless we can express our true feelings, you know, our true concerns, then nobody else in the team is really going to be doing that, not to the deepest of sense. And I finally realized that clearly the more senior I got in the organization, the further away I got from the front line, the further away I got from customers. So we had to create a culture where people were willing to share and tell the truth. This is how people are generally feeling. This is what our customers are generally saying. And I think there's a little bit of, in big financial services organizations, I think this is why we had the Royal Commission here. This is why many of the UK and the US banks have hit serious problems, is because people were not willing to tell the truth about what was really going on.
Mm.
And that starts with the leader being able to express how they're feeling and create that culture where there's very, very open dialogue about the really good, but also the really challenging. And I think that was why, I mean, I grew up, I believe I built great teams, but I believe we could have, you know, gone even further than the success that we had.
Yeah.
And my final question, then we'll open it up to the groups. Mindset is something we talk a lot about in Future You, and people, you know, sometimes lacking the confidence, lacking the self-belief to really chase the life that they want and move from where they are to becoming, you know, future them. Any thoughts around what kind of daily practices or daily activities or daily routines do you have that help you or those around you improve, you know, the self-belief, the self-confidence, the self-esteem?
I think it's a great question. It's something I always reflect on. And what I've learned over my journey is that the better I feel about myself, the stronger mindset I have, obviously, and the better my body language and energy in my voice is. So I've always, you know, been very, very strict around making sure I have an hour of the day to myself. And I know it's an often said thing in the corporate world and the leadership world that, you know, give yourself an hour a day about you, about, you know, getting out in the fresh air and staying fit. Well, you know, that hasn't been that easy over the last 8 months, and particularly for our colleagues here in the UK and in Victoria. And my heartfelt best wishes go out to all of you, because I know how tough it is. I've got family who are in the same situation. But it's just about having that hour of the day to do something for yourself and making sure that your mindset is strong. And it can be physical, or it can be, you know, mental exercises. I have a mental agility coach that I work closely with. And it's just that sounding board of this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, and having some exercises or some different ideas from outside the bubble that you live in every day, to maybe just shift that mindset. The other thing that I always am very focused on is my body language. The minute I step out of the car to walk into the office or to a branch or to the dressing room, back when I was coaching in football, because we all talk about first impressions and how important they are. And I just think when you're in a leadership position or a coaching position, people feed off that. And the first impression can't be changed. In my experience, you can try and change it. You can get an hour into your day and think, shoulders are a bit slouched, my voice is a bit flat. Come on, need to lift your game, and you might make an improvement. But I think once that first impression is there, if you walk through the door and everyone feels your vibe and feeds off that, then you've set the tone for the rest of the day. So they're things that I work on a daily basis. I'll always reflect and keep a diary and just jot down, you know, a tick or a cross if I got, you know, if I had a good day or a bad day. I make sure I never follow a cross with a cross. You know, if there was a bad day because I just didn't get things right, which happens, we're all human, I'm doubly determined to make sure tomorrow's a tick. and I'll probably go too far the other way and make sure it's a double tick. But people feed off that as well. So, yeah, I think it's really important, Andy. A really good question.
Well, I mean, I talk to people all the time about Mozart time, which is that time for yourself, by yourself, with yourself, which is what you've just talked about there, Phil. And I always just say to my bank managers, the way you come in is the way they go out. As you've absolutely nailed it there, those first impressions, the way you come in, if you get that wrong in the first 5 minutes, you're setting the tone for the day. And that's the way that they're going to go out, and that's how they're going to be when they're serving your customers, between the moment you come in and the moment they go out. With that, I'd love to I could talk to you for hours, Phil. This has been absolutely incredible. I'm so fired up, but I want to open it up and just see if anyone's got a question for you. We're going to run a little bit longer than we normally do, but that's because of the quality of the conversation. We'll run for about another 8 or 9 minutes, and then we'll let everyone get into the rest of the day. So if you've got a question, maybe just take yourself off mute or wave at me, and then please do take the opportunity. I'm looking across the floor. Who's got a question they'd like to ask Phil? Chris, far away.
One over there. Thank you very much. Firstly, thanks, Phil, for everything that you shared with us just then. There was one thing in particular that you mentioned, and I sort of wanted to get into your headspace a bit to see how you would deal with this. So this is when you said that, when you step into that role and you're given that that team, let's not necessarily call them a high performing team at the moment, but in the perception of the people that say, this is the team, look after them, make sure you don't, break anything, if you like, but keep that team and you'll be fine. How do you deal with it if when you get there and you look into it and you delve in a bit deeper and you find out actually everything is not as it seems, and there are areas we can improve, but maybe there's some areas that can't be improved and it might mean replacing people. So how do you deal with that? Because it's an awkward one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, Chris, and it's a great question, because it works both ways. Sometimes you walk in and it's not as bad as what people have told you. Sometimes you walk in and it's not as good as people have told you. So it's about, for me, I take in all the information, but I form my own opinion. I'm very strong on face value, and I had an example just in this last 12 months where there was a team member that, as I was taking over the team, a former GM didn't give this person a great rap, and they ended up with a 2 on their performance card out of 5, and they've just had their performance conversation today and ended up with a 4 12 months later. And what it was basically take the information on for me, but then really assess it on face value and what I think the impressions are of the person. But I always maintain that when you first walk through that door as a team leader or the coach, the team respects you because of your title. So you're the leader or you're the coach. But from that moment on, it's up to you to keep earning that respect. So it's not a tag that you can just sit back on and go, oh, well, I'm the boss, so everyone should respect me. It's something that I walk in and I'm very aware that most people in the room would respect you. But I had a different challenge because I was coming from professional sport into banking. So I'm walking into that room going, well, I wouldn't blame anyone in this room, any branch manager, for not respecting me from the point of view of I haven't had a minute's experience in the banking world. So the way I dealt with that was, to Andy's point before, I just decided to make that first meeting all about me being as vulnerable as I could be, and make it about the team. And I'm here to learn from you guys about banking, and I'm going to bring some things to the table that are outside your square around professional sport and mindset and obligation versus opportunity and so forth. And then I started to just look closely, and one of the leadership or one of the pieces of advice I got from a world-renowned coach called Gus Hiddink, who took the Socceroos to the World Cup in, we got any Dutch people on the call? No, but some people who follow football will have heard of Gus Hiddink, famous manager, coached Chelsea to the FA Cup, took the Socceroos to the first World Cup in 32 years. He said to me, Phil, because I said, can you give me one piece of advice, one piece of gold, give me a gold nugget? And he goes, you got 2 eyes, 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And I'm sure we've all heard it, but how often do we think about how much we observe, how much we listen, and sometimes do we talk too much, or do we, is sometimes the less we say, the more we say. So those sort of things, Chris, I don't know if I've answered your question in a roundabout sort of way, but for me, it was all about making sure I took the information on board, but really assessed it at face value and observed, listened, and spoke less.
Thanks. And I actually really love the other side of it, where you've gone from, they're a great team, to actually they're not a great team. You need to change it, and you see it differently. So that's, I've been there. So thank you, Phil.
No problem. Mike Morris, did you have a question before?
Yeah, thanks for this. It's great to listen in. One of the things you mentioned was about your experience with the chairman at Central Coast Mariners, and we're all involved in leadership and stakeholder management. So when you're talking to your team, who's the most important group of people that you try and direct them to look after? Is it the fans or the customers? Is it their colleagues, or is it the board and the chairman?
Great question. So as a football coach, you've got 4 stakeholders. You've got the ownership and the board as one. You've got the dressing room, the players, you've got the fans, and you've got the media. You lose one of them in the modern day because of social media. You lose one of them, you're starting to struggle. You lose 2 of them, it's very close to fatal, if not fatal. So managing those 4 stakeholders on a daily basis and having, I guess, of course, the owner's money basically in your pocket and how you use it is obviously crucial. Like if there's one person that you need to have a strong relationship with as a coach, it's the owner of the club. I don't know how that translates to the corporate world. I've had a good relationship with the 3 general managers that I've had above me in 2 years at NAB. How important my relationship is with the general manager above him or her, I'm not so sure. But I've managed those relationships just naturally because I love people and love building relationships. But yeah, in football terms, crucial that you've got the owner and the board. But the reason we fell out was I was asked to do something that was just in a totally different direction to where I wanted to go. And I had a big decision: do I sell my soul or to the devil, or do I stand up for what I believe is right and protect my career for the right reasons? And I decided to go that way instead of selling my soul. And I was out of a job, but if you sell your soul, what have you got left to fall back on?
100%. That's why I never moved past being a general manager. Paul Tucker, I think you had a question.
I've only got 16 questions, Andy, so I could talk to Phil all night, but maybe one day we'll get that opportunity. Maybe a little bit different away from the leadership question, Phil, but a lot of us on here would give up limbs to work in sport, and you've made the other decision to go the other way. Reflections on the comparison between the 2 industries, and are you happy? Is it a decision that sits well with you?
Great question.
Thanks, Paul, for asking that question. I miss football every day. If I'm being brutally honest, football it's never been a job for me. It's always been a passion. To get paid to play it and then coach in it was the greatest feeling I've ever had. But I had this opportunity and this challenge to do something that was completely out of my comfort zone. And it was such a strong pull to do something like that was totally different, that I couldn't resist it. And do I have any regrets? No, not a single regret. And in fact, a year ago, and I was telling Ross this story not long ago, about a year ago, I got an offer to go back into football with Sydney FC into an even better role than assistant coach. It was like the general manager of football with a coaching role attached to it with the first team. So you'd be back travelling around Asia and travelling around Australia playing all the big games. And I knocked it back on its merits just because I felt like I'd made this massive leap for the right reasons, with the right intentions, I'd loved my first 12 months at NAB. So I knocked it back. 3 days later, I got a tap on the shoulder to go to a higher role, a state role instead of a regional role. And then a year later, I've gone into another role, which is now a national role, around leadership coaching, corporate coaching. So don't regret a minute of it. Miss football every single day because I just love the game and I'm passionate about it. And I love working with, a dressing room full of elite people and elite staff and everything that comes with it. It's hard work. It's 24/7 or 25/8, as I used to call it. I know we can all relate to on this call. But I stay involved as president of the Football Coaches Australia, which is the Association for Professional Coaches. So I'm president of that, and I still do a bit of media work on TV and radio around the A-League and the Socceroos. So I keep my finger in the pie, as it were, but I don't think anything can ever replace the adrenaline of standing in the technical area on game day.
Oh, you try coaching an under-12s girls team, mate. That's up there.
That's good coaching. I can't believe you got hair on your head.
Yeah, it's losing. Thanks, Phil.
Phil, I'm going to we're going to have to pause there. I mean, I know there's many of us that could keep this conversation going for a considerable amount of time. First of all, I want to thank you immensely. I have learned a significant amount. I'd work for you any day of the week. Absolutely. And the word that hasn't popped up into the conversation but is dominating my mind at the moment is integrity. You know, you speak with such depth, such authenticity, humility, such, really incredibly well thought through leadership practices, coaching practices, cultural practices. It's been a real honour and a privilege, and if it's acceptable to yourself, we'd love to get you back in 2 or 3 months when you're into your next journey and continue the conversation, because it's been absolutely tremendous. So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming on this morning, this afternoon, this evening, and investing some of your time with myself and Phil. Phil, I truly appreciate it, and we're all rooting for you to be incredibly successful wherever the journey takes you, both within and out with of National Australia Bank. So thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and take care, everybody. Keep winning.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ed.